Welcome back, everybody. This Week in America on the Blue Funk Broadcasting Radio Network. Great to have you with us on the program today. As mentioned, Dianne Collins is with us in the program. She's the creator of the QuantumThink system of thinking. She has advised executives in the world's leading corporations, inspired entrepreneurs, celebrities, students, and evolutionaries. She's the author of the book, Do You Quantum Think? New Thinking That Will Rock Your World, by the way, winner of the 2012 Global eBook Award. And she's with us on This Week in America. Dianne, welcome to the program. Great to have you with us.
Thank you, Rick. It's great to be with you.
Fascinated by the book, and once you're reading it, it's like opens all these great ideas and possibilities, and we find out sometimes how we get in our own way in terms of progressing in life and getting things accomplished. Let's basically start with why you decided we really have to come up with a new way to think. How did that all evolve?
That evolved when I was much younger. Let's not get into age here, though. And, all my life, I would say, since teenage, I would think, well, everyone has high aspirations in the world. We all want to live the virtues and the wisdom of every uh, wisdom tradition, and really, all the things that we know, do unto others and all that, Rick. And yet, what I noticed is that we weren't doing it. So along the way, I thought, well, what's going on? And I learned this: as you think, so you become. And whether you believe that our thinking has a direct result on our experience and on our outcomes in life, at least logically, you realize that our patterns of thinking shape our actions, shape literally what comes out of our mouth, how we listen, and therefore all of our results. So, my quest was this, Rick. I thought, well, if all you had to do is change your thought to change the world, if all you had to do is change your thinking to change your life, then why does my life still look the way it does?
Exactly. Yes.
And so that is when I went on a kind of personal research. And I did make a revelation that though we imagine we're choosing our thoughts, we all like to think of ourselves as independent thinkers. I'm sure you do too, and everyone listening, that actually our thinking patterns are shaped by, and this is going to sound a little lofty, but it's just stay with it a moment, our world view, which is simply what we believe to be true about the nature of reality and how it works. And so,
Yeah, I'm
right,
absorbing that. Yes. So,
yeah,
and I
good.
understand. I understand what you're saying. At the beginning of the book, and by the way, our guest is Dianne Collins, and Dianne is Dianne, two N's, Collins, COLLINS.com, DianneCollins.com. The book is Do You Quantum Think? New Thinking That Will Rock Your World, and it will. Dianne Collins, the author, and our guest in the program. Towards the beginning of the book, you've got, and maybe this is like where everybody can sort of relate to, maybe the only way we're going to relate to Einstein, but he says, we can't solve problems by using the same kind of thinking we used when we created them. Is that sort of basically the starting point here where, okay, if we're going to change, we're going to have to think of a different way to go about that change?
That's exactly right. And the best way is for me to give an example. So, the premise of Do You Quantum Think, the book, is that we're living in a quantum age. We know that everything is changing today. You and I have talked about, even the weather patterns are changing. Whether you're a
Yes.
climate change believer or not, you can tell that the weather patterns are changing. Our technology has made three conditions: an accelerating pace of change, uh, an unfathomable uncertainty. You never know what's going to happen from day to day. We're all continuously surprised by the
Yes.
news around the world. And the third thing is that we have so many choices, so much information. So, what I discovered is, though we're in a quantum age, our thinking patterns, the way we think, is still very much shaped by what I lovingly call the old world view, the industrial age. So, what does that mean? Well, the whole way that science looks at, what we know now about what actually the effect of thinking on ourselves and on our outcomes is this. We used to think about the universe as a giant machine. So you could translate that as circumstances. Everything moves in one direction linearly, step by step. Time moves in one direction. If you want to change something, you have to somehow manipulate the circumstances of life. What's different in a quantum age is that now, since Einstein, you mentioned him, and the quantum scientists who followed him have discovered that, and this is how they say it, the universe is more like a giant mind. It's multidimensional, and that if we want to see how to master our destiny, how to think in a new way, we literally have to catch our thinking up with the way our technology works. So, you and I are on radio. We're on the internet, I'm sure. We're, in so many places. And this does not work in a machine, step by step, linear logic manner. And so, how do we update our thinking? How do we think for a world that's really beyond the limits of ordinary chronological time and space? That we have so many choices, Rick, that it's like, as if you just think about it, how are we going to catch up? We're not, because we'll be huffing and puffing and trying to catch up with this constantly accelerating pace of change, which, by the way, is a scientific fact. So, what do? Well, we make a leap, a literal leap in the framework from which we think. And we start to learn, Rick, what we've never learned in traditional education about how the actual faculties of mind, what I call the natural faculties of mind, not the psychology of mind, not the brain, but you could say, invisible, just as radio waves are invisible, the invisible intelligent field that we are the center of, that we influence with our habits of thinking. So when you can see, as the Einstein quote really indicates, in order to go beyond your automatic patterns of thinking, and many of how we think is automatic, much of it, no insult to anyone, it's just a cultural way that we've been trained, that kind of old world machine like way of being, that now when you can become aware of these automatic approaches that we have to life, to our relationships, to our business results, to how we think about ourselves and what we're capable of, when you can see the limits, you can go beyond them. And this really does get back to what you quoted from Einstein. How do you go beyond, how do you get new thinking?
Well, I want to talk about that. And you're listening to This Week in America on the Blue Funk Broadcasting Radio Network. The book is called Do You Quantum Think? New Thinking That Will Rock Your World. It's an award-winning book. Dianne Collins is the author. She's our guest on the program today. Dianne is with two N's. Collins is Collins. So two N's, two L's in her name, DianneCollins.com. Go to our website, thisweekinamerica.us, and you can link on to Dianne's website, get information on the book. The book is available all across the country. I, like so many baby boomers, grew up the formative years in the 50s, 60s, 70s, getting out into the business world, that type of thing. So my thinking, I'm sure, is totally dictated by that's my world. That was the world that I grew up in. My thinking is probably still based in that world. How do I expand that to now think, not going back to what I learned in the 60s and 70s, but what reality is in 2013?
Well, let me give you one principle that can literally, this is really the fundamental principle of a quantum worldview. And that is, now, outside, I want to make a caveat, Rick. Outside of anything that someone thinks of as divine creator or any of that, uh, for ordinary, everyday people, you and me, there are no absolutes. This is the great factor of science that is called the theory of uncertainty that changed everything. Now, why aren't there any absolutes? So just think this is the fundamental principle, no absolutes. The old world industrial age view, they were trying to predict and control. They saw physical objects as, everything was fixed. Circumstances are fixed. That's the way it is, right? Now, looking from the quantum worldview, everything is energy in flux informed by intelligence. What does that mean? Nothing is fixed and solid, even though it appears that way to our ordinary physical five senses. We know under high powered microscope it's not that way at all. Now, why is that important? Because when you think of how this maps onto our thinking, that if nothing is absolutely fixed and solid, if the circumstances in our lives are not fixed and solid, and we are the ones who can shape it newly by virtue of our own intent, then this gives us tremendous mastery in our own lives. So when you look at what you're talking about, Rick, baby boomers, and by the way, it's not just baby boomers, it's really the entire whole, humanity that we're talking about, but you're talking about baby boomers, which is important. And because everyone knows we're living longer now, it's and as the world changes, you tend to look at and reevaluate, well, what do I really want now? What's next for me in my life? And as you say, if you're stuck with your old patterns of thinking, well, this is the way it is. I've done this for the last 10, 15, 25 years. And so I don't know how I'm going to make a change now. I want to move from Indiana to Florida, but I don't see how to do it now. That touches a little chord there,
Yes,
right?
I like that. Yes. Walk me through. We'll talk afterwards. You can walk me through that process.
But anyway, so as soon as you realize that just because you have a thought does not make it, quote, the absolute truth. Remember, absolute means true for all times, under all circumstances, and to anyone. So there's nothing absolute. Now, we have thoughts that I call visit us. A lot of thoughts, because we exist in fields, and remember, the old worldview taught us to only look in the physical. The new worldview, and Einstein even said the particle is more, is the, excuse me, the field is more important than the particle, meaning what we're surrounded by, the intelligent fields that are energy intelligence, that we are part and parcel of, are influencing us. And, this sounds scientific, Rick, but you can walk into a room and you know this. You walk into a party, one side of the room are a bunch of, grumbling, complaining, woe is me type people.
Yes.
Side of the room, they're exuberant. Now, you don't have to hear a word they say, and you experience each different energy field. So it's something like that. And so when you can distinguish these visiting thoughts that I say are not even your own, this is what I call in Do You Quantum Think the myth of choice. Every moment we have the opportunity to choose our thinking, to choose an intent. What do I really want right now in this moment? How do I want to see my son or daughter right now? Am I going to be stuck thinking that, oh, she's a slow learner? Or do I realize that just because I have that thought, wherever it came from, is irrelevant, Rick? that thought, because our thoughts do shape the field, the energy field, our relational field, how we relate with others, that you don't want to have that thought. If you were choosing a thought, you would not be choosing, my daughter is a slow learner.
Exactly.
And even though you may have some evidence to that, what the quantum worldview means, no absolutes. You are not stuck with that reality. You are not stuck with that version. And in fact, the more you hold on to that thought, the more mass and energy you add to it. So you want to be able to see the limits of your thinking. Realize that if you were at choice, you wouldn't be choosing that. Realize that nobody we know in our lives, no matter how much evidence, 20 years of an ex-husband or a wife, whatever thoughts and conclusions you have are not the absolute truth. When you can see that limit and start to look from the quantum worldview framework, no absolutes, then what's directing the future? What's directing my present with this person right now is that I can generate a new intent of how I want to relate to my daughter. My daughter is enthusiastic, wants to do great in school, and really has her own way of learning, and I support whatever way of learning she has. I mean, there's any number, it's infinite possibility universe. That's one of the principles. In fact, just to add
We got
that,
about 30 seconds left in the program.
oh, okay. Well,
Actually, we'll have Dianne back, and I encourage you to read the book. And I guess it just in sort of summarizing, and you touched on it there, the myth of choice, that our thoughts are not random. And what you're talking about with do you quantum think, new thinking that will rock your world, is basically a new relationship between ourselves and our thoughts.
exactly. And when you can realize the principles of quantum thinking, which there are 21, that's what I was going to say, it's kind of like putting it all together and saying, oh, this is really being in sync with the nature of my thinking, how it works, and how I can direct my world and my experience of life the way I want it to go.
It's an excellent book, as I mentioned, an award-winning book. Dianne Collins has been our guest on This Week in America. Dianne is Dianne, 2 N's, Collins, Collins, 2 L's, DianneCollins.com. The book is Do You Quantum Think? New Thinking That Will Rock Your World. It's available, of course, at Dianne's website, available all across the country. If you don't remember all of that, just go to our website, thisweekinamerica.us, and you can link on to Dianne's website. An excellent book, Dianne. Looking forward to having you back on the program. Thank you for sharing it with us today on This Week in America.
Thank you, Rick. Great to be with you, and I look forward to next time.
Our pleasure. You're listening to This Week in America on the Blue Funk Broadcasting Radio Network.